Good afternoon, students. Welcome to our environmental science class. Our topic for today is the carbon cycle. I'm Mr. David Smith.
My name is Mr. Cassandra Stevens.
Okay. Our focus question for today will be, what is the carbon cycle? General objective. At the end of this lesson, students should understand the process of the carbon cycle and its importance.
Our specific objectives for today is, at the end of this lesson, students should be able to outline the steps of the carbon cycle. Students should also be able to state the importance of the carbon cycle. Also, students should be able to explain how does the process of the carbon cycle work. And in doing all of these activities, students should be able to work harmoniously in groups. Okay.
Alright. So students, what comes to mind when you hear the term carbon cycle? First,
we're going to play a short video for you guys to understand the whole process.
sit tight, relax, focus vividly on this video. Here is a video explaining the carbon cycle, students. Pay attention.
The air around us is made up of many different gases, including oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and inert gases. Oxygen and carbon dioxide in particular are important for the survival of living organisms. The amount of these gases in the atmosphere is maintained by the carbon cycle and the oxygen cycle, respectively. The carbon cycle is the cycle that maintains the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by continuously taking carbon dioxide from the air and releasing it back into the air. When green plants undergo the process of photosynthesis to make food, they absorb carbon dioxide from the air. The carbon element stored in plants is then transferred to animals that eat the plants. When plants and animals die, their dead bodies decompose and release carbon dioxide back into the air due to the actions of fungi and bacteria in the soil. In addition, all living organisms, including plants and animals, release carbon dioxide into the air through the process of respiration in their entire lifetime. Over a long period of time, the bodies of dead organisms become fossil fuels, which are used by factories, power stations, and vehicles. The combustion or burning of fossil fuels also releases carbon dioxide into the air. In summary, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is maintained when photosynthesis, which is a process that requires carbon dioxide, is balanced by decomposition, respiration, and combustion, which are processes that release carbon dioxide. The oxygen cycle, on the other hand, maintains the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere also by continuously taking oxygen from the air and releasing it back into the air. Like the carbon cycle, the processes that require oxygen, such as respiration, combustion, decomposition, and rusting, are balanced by photosynthesis, which releases oxygen back into the air. Many human activities, such as illegal logging and the excessive use of pesticides, interfere with the carbon and oxygen cycles. The consequences of this interference include global warming and the greenhouse effect, which may eventually cause fertile lands to become dry. The ways to reduce the interference with the carbon and oxygen cycles include planting more trees to help reforestation, stopping the burning of fields and forests, preventing the excessive release of smoke from vehicles, avoiding the excessive use of pesticides, banning illegal logging, and making tougher laws to protect the environment.
you created a business.
Okay, class, so that video was very informative. It gave the definition of the carbon cycle and it gave a really informative summary of the process of the carbon cycle and what that process involves. So, based on your understanding of that video, I would like you guys to access the Padlet website and view. I would like you guys to put your definition of what you think the carbon cycle is about on this platform. I see that someone already brought their definition across. Let's read it together, class. The carbon cycle is the process where carbon compounds are interchanged among the biosphere, the geosphere, the pedosphere, the hydrosphere, and the atmosphere on Earth. So that is a good definition, but I know that you guys can do better. So access the platform and let me see your definitions.
The students, what comes to mind when you hear the term, carbon cycle? Well, as you can see, there are some words affiliated with the carbon cycle. We have carbon, carbon dioxide, greenhouse effect, photosynthesis, respiration, fossil fuel, and lastly, decomposers. We'll now have Mr. Sanjay Stevens giving you the definition of carbon cycle.
Okay, class. So this is a great definition of the carbon cycle. If you were to give me this definition in the exam, you will get full marks. So the carbon cycle can be considered as the series of processes by which carbon compounds are introverted in the environment, involving the incorporation of carbon dioxide into living tissue by photosynthesis and its return to the atmosphere through respiration. It can also be brought back into the environment by the decay of dead organisms and the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, class. So now we're getting down into business. We're diving deeper and deeper into the lesson. So we're going to talk about some steps of the carbon cycle. So if you would zoom into the image, you will see that the first step is photosynthesis, followed by decomposition. Then we have respiration, followed by combustion. Now, Mr. Smith will be further elaborating on these steps.
Hello again, class. So first we'll talk about photosynthesis. So plants pull in carbon dioxide out of the air through photosynthesis. Even though carbon dioxide makes up less than 1% of the atmosphere, it plays a major role in living things. With CO2 and H2O in the atmosphere, photosynthesis produces sugar like glucose. This is the plant material that plants synthesize on their own. If you have the right conditions, this process can repeat for centuries. Not only does photosynthesis pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but it fuels all living things as a source of energy. The next step will be decomposition. So, by mostly using sunlight, water and carbon dioxide, plants can grow. In turn, animals consume food for energy. Using O2, which is oxygen, and giving off CO2, which is carbon dioxide. Alternatively, they die, decay, decompose, repeating for many years. Decomposition is the process of breaking down plants over a vast period of time. Layers of sediment build on each other. Because of the pressure and heat from within the Earth's crust, this generates fossil fuels. Much of this happened during the Carboniferous era. For example, coal, oil, and natural gas, methane, are some of the common fossil fuels. Over the long term, the decomposition of dead matter generates these fossil fuel products. The next process, or the next step, would be respiration. You and I both are made of carbon. Do you get that, students? You and I both are made of carbon. We consume plants, but we also breathe in air, which has carbon in the form of carbon dioxide. Animals rely on plants for food, energy, and oxygen. Our cells require oxygen to break down the food we consume through cellular respiration. Once consumed, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere because of cell respiration, as I stated earlier. In turn, this carbon dioxide produced from respirant cell can be used in photosynthesis again. In other words, the plants use solar energy to break apart that same carbon dioxide in the air through photosynthesis. It uses that same carbon for plant, in turn releasing oxygen again. The last step of the carbon cycle class would be combustion. Last, your parents, most of your parents are drivers, right? And most of you take vehicles to come to school. Cars use energy released by burning fossil fuels, and carbon is also a pollutant as carbon dioxide. We extract fossil fuels. Combustion involves burning them to release energy. But a byproduct of combustion is that it releases carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And too much carbon dioxide increases the greenhouse effect. Remember the words I stated earlier, affiliated with the carbon cycle? There it went again. And as we deplete our oil reserves, adding carbon dioxide into the air daily, this affects the carbon cycle. With an imbalance of oxygen and carbon, carbon dioxide is one of the greenhouse gases contributing to climate change. Using sunlight, it increases the molecule called glucose and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Humans discovered these fossil fuels beneath the ocean. We start to drill the ancient plankton, which is over 1 million years ago, and that became the oil we use today. I hope you students got an understanding of the steps. Over to you, Mr. Stevens.
Okay, class. I trust that Mr. Smith has delivered the steps well informative, but for my visual learners, don't worry, I have something for you guys. So now we have a diagram, a visual diagram of the carbon cycle. So as you see right here, CO2 is present in the atmosphere. Then you have the process of photosynthesis. This is when the trees consume these carbon, pull these carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Correct? Then we have the animals. These animals consume these plants and the CO2 will bioaccumulate in these creatures. However, these creatures will eventually pass away and they will decompose. So they will decompose into the ground. Also, these plants, they will also decompose. They will also decompose into the ground. Animals give off carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere by respiration. So animal inhales oxygen and they exhales carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Another way that carbon dioxide can be released into the atmosphere is by plant respiration. And now we have the decomposition. These organisms may also further decompose into fossil fuels. These fossil fuels are used by factories which combust and produce carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So class, this is a very good representation of the cycle. All the processes are involved in this diagram. And I trust that you would, in your spare time, view the diagram and point out all of the important steps in this process. Now class, before we conclude today's lesson, we have to discuss the importance of the carbon cycle. Carbon is an essential element for all life. So understanding how it moves helps us to understand the biological process and factors that influence them.
One form carbon takes is the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. Increased levels of carbon dioxide insulate the earth, causing temperatures to rise. Understanding how carbon dioxide is absorbed and released helps us to understand the climate and predict global warming.
Carbon is not in balance, so it is important to learn where it is being stored and released. The rate at which carbon is disposed into living organisms is not the same as the rate as it is returned to the earth. So there is 100 times more carbon in living matter than in the earth. Burning fossil fuel release massive amount of carbon into the atmosphere and to the earth.
And lastly, the carbon cycle is tied to the availability of other elements and components. For example, the carbon cycle is tied to the availability of O2, which is oxygen in the atmosphere. During photosynthesis, plants take carbon dioxide from the air and use it to make glucose, stored in the carbon, while releasing oxygen. So class, there's a test we would like you to do, and please, no complaints, students. We gave you all the information. All the information. You don't have to worry about anything. The information was there throughout Mr. Smith and I, Mr. Stevens and I presentation. You can see now the questions are there.
Yes, class. So you should access quizzes.com in which you are going to be given 13 questions. You should answer these questions to the best of your abilities. Alright, see you next class.
Alright, students. Thank you.